Well, thanks so much, and I'm excited to be here. Actually, I'll go one step further than that. I'm not just excited to be here, I'm really grateful to be here and a bit humbled. Almost 20 years ago, Inc. magazine changed my life. There was an article written about me, which ultimately led to my being able to write the book Never Eat Alone, which was the gateway for me to be the kind of servant of leaders and a researcher and all that I have been doing for the last 20 years associated with the transformation of organizations and leadership and the future of work really started right here. And this community is a very meaningful one to me, and I'm grateful to be here. My conversation today is really focused on one thing. I call it the Great Reboot. Your ability as a leader, as an entrepreneur, to fundamentally level up has probably never been more possible, more prominent, more critical, more imminent than it is absolutely right now. Many organizations are digging out of a hole and will be digging out of a hole for the next 18 months, but other organizations are leaping forward, are redefining their business models, are redefining the way they're working, are captivating opportunities. There are going to be fortunes lost, but there are going to be fortunes made. And the conversation I want us to have is how to be on the right side of the balance sheet, how to be on the right side, not of 10%, but 10x. How do we truly reboot and transform in these very tumultuous, volatile times? And I'm not talking about the ones we're in right now or have been in for the last months, but the ones we're going to be in continuously going forward, which I think we all recognize. I've recently started a set of research so that we don't use the words when we or how we get back to work. I want us to be focused not on getting back to work, but I want us to be focused on going forward to work, forward 5 years, to be the kind of leaders that we will need to be in the marketplace 5 years hence. I'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the other inputs to this discussion, I think, go back a little bit further than the work I'm doing right now. They go back to me as a young man, young boy, 8, 9 years of age, sitting at my father's dinner table. My old man was an unemployed steelworker in Pittsburgh. And back in the 70s, the industry had collapsed. The steel industry had collapsed around us. My father was unemployed. All of my friends' parents were unemployed. My mother had to become a cleaning lady. I had to go work at the local country club just to make the same amount of money, 20 bucks, as my mom was making cleaning houses, bringing back to home. And I made a commitment when I was a young man because I had heard my father talk about his engagement at work, the fact that he saw some of this coming, the fact that the managers that he worked under, the foreman that he worked under, would even hold some of he and his peers back, claiming that if they worked too fast, that they'd be throwing off the piece rate and that they needed to slow down, or that ideas that they had wouldn't be embraced. The principle that I believe in, which is transformation is a team game, transformation is collaboration, transformation is co-elevation, going higher together, was certainly not practiced at that time. And I made a commitment as a young man that I was going to grow up someday and I was going to make a difference. And I thought maybe I was going to be in politics or be the governor of Pennsylvania and make a difference. But what I realized over time is that we can make a difference in families' lives through the work that we do, through how we bring ways of working which actually change and reboot not just organizational culture, but cultural around us, as well as sustaining a thriving family. So the core grain of a lot of what I'm going to be bringing to you has really deep roots of many, many years ago. Now, in addition to that, what I bring to you today is my experience over the last 20 years, looking at and guiding the transformation of executive teams. My specialty and focus is how an executive team becomes and is transformational. I was blessed to be at the table with the turnaround of General Motors coming out of bankruptcy. And particularly valuable and impactful to me because my dad was a UAW steelworker. But to watch that organization have a set of mindsets and behaviors and practices going into bankruptcy that then turned around, and people like Mary Barra, who has done extraordinary, beautiful work in reorganizing and re-energizing and redefining that organization, and Mark Royce, who are co-elevating partner in that business, to move that organization forward. I've seen that transformation. So I've seen what's possible from the rubble and legacy of past. I've also seen extraordinary organizations like Zoom and Eric at Zoom, and how he's built an organization that has come on to the forefront and redefined a space that we're all living in today. Or companies that have been 100 years old, like Parsons Aerospace, and seeing them go public, but seeing them go public in a way that, while bankers didn't think they could, that co-elevating executive team knew that it could. I've seen, and I'll give you one more, a Russian entrepreneur who was moving his company from 1 billion to 10 billion, but in the process freed up 30% of his time because he moved his own team from overload, right? And him being the hub and spoke to shared load, where that team took on the responsibility of elevating each other, of development, of coaching, of feedback, of bringing ideas, of innovating, of boldly, I call it teaming out, which we'll be talking about. But all of that is coming into this discussion. And then the last thing I want to talk about, a couple more things I want to talk about that I'm bringing in today's discussion, is 4 years of research that we did, funded in 2015 to 2019, on a subject that nobody cared about. It was a subject I called the new people rules in a virtual and remote world. We knew eventually remote and virtual was going to be coming down. And I was working with Cisco at the time, and it was certainly John Chambers' drum that he was beating with telepresence and WebEx, et cetera. But I believed it, and I wanted to do that research. So between him and Accenture and Siemens Communications, we did $2 million of research, published 18 studies in Harvard Business Review over a period of 4 or 5 years, actually. And it was over that period of time that I really started to understand that remote organizations can be better than physically co-located organizations if you run it well. And we're going to be talking about that today. Now, last couple of things I want to talk to you about today is the new principle of leadership. Over about an 8-year period, we've been doing research on what does it mean to be a leader in a world today different than it was before. And I wrote and published in March this book, Leading Without Authority. Leading Without Authority. It's for the people who are holding themselves back because you're relying on gaining more authority for being transformational. I want you to believe that the people that report into you, they will find only the greatest transformational value by your ability to unleash their interdependencies, by stepping out of the way as a leader and to lift them up and have them lift each other up and challenge each other and confront each other and infuse ideas and energy and relationships, because they are co-elevating, they are committed to your mission, but they're committed to each other. And that leading without authority is a principle, an absolute principle of leadership today that I'm going to be bringing to this. And then finally, this massive research project that we have just launched, this massive research project called Go Forward to Work. Go Forward to Work. You can get more at, and I'll be giving you more resources as we go through. At Go Forward to Work, we have begun and we've put hundreds of entrepreneurs like yourself, executives, thought leaders, into focus groups of 25 at a time, breaking into small breakout rooms of 3 to 5, and committing to look at what does it mean to lead in this kind of a radically volatile world that we're living in today and we will be emerging into going forward. And all of this work is what I'm bringing to you. But what it requires for you to be willing to do and to consider is something that I call recontracting. Recontracting. There's a set of social norms that you as a leader have been allowing to occur in your organizations. And as I was talking to Scott, the new editor at Inc., we believe, and I believe very strongly, that the advent of the old entrepreneurial, swashbuckling, unfortunately, increasingly in the past, hierarchical, perhaps control-oriented leadership styles, that's got to give way to this new principle of co-elevation. It's got to give way where we can't be the chokehold of innovation. We as entrepreneurs have to open up and let people come into their own potential of finding those unintended growth opportunities. And if you adopt this principle of co-elevation that I'm going to be talking to you about, if you recontract with your team that we are going to behave differently than we behaved in the past, we are going to be radically adaptable, co-elevating, and transformational, all bundled together, that you will find your growth solution that you might not have found yet. This great reboot, if you haven't found it yet, you've been looking at others that have, it's not too late. You can either crawl out of this over the next 18 months, or you can use this as wind behind you to be truly breakthrough and leap ahead 5 years. Interestingly enough, that 74% of people on teams claim they don't get value out of being as a part of the team. They don't get innovative, collaborative value about being as a part of the team. They're plugging themselves into a team, plugging their work into a team. And that's not actually what's moving the advancement of innovation and transformation. But that means we've got to lead these teams differently. I'm going to give you some very distinct practices that I think will be very powerful for you. Your team needs to hold each other accountable. They need to challenge each other. 70% of people on teams say that they can't speak up boldly in a room. They can't challenge each other, 70%. And a lot of that is because we as entrepreneurs are taking up too much of the oxygen, too much of the energy in the room. We aren't allowing that kind of fluid peer-to-peer coaching, that peer-to-peer feedback and dialogue that we need. And I want to give you some very distinct practices, I believe, in a remote world that makes it even easier than ever before to accomplish. I want to make sure that your team has each other's back. The relationships have to be strong. There can't be the kind of stressors between people. We've got to make sure that our commitments are deep, caring, supportive. In chapter 2 of Leading Without Authority, I talk about earning the right to lead your peers. I call it opening this thing called porosity. I want your people to be sponges to each other. And the principle of that is serve, share, and care. Serve, share, and care. And we need to learn what it's like to open each other to being challenging, etc. You've got to earn the relationship permission. Psychological safety is so important among your team. And we have to leave this team capable of caring so much about each other that they wouldn't hold back to truth. Now, I talk about this recontracting, and I can get a lot more into the 8 areas that your team needs to contract. I even have a survey that you can fill out on the 8 areas and diagnose whether your team is a co-elevating team or not today. But I want to get into the practices with you and how you can re-engineer the way you function in meetings. And in order to do that, I'm going to send you somewhere else to go get more information about the recontracting. You can pick up a recontracting guide and a video on how to be able to start thinking about this specific recontracting, and a diagnostic survey that you can fill out and you can have your team fill out to assess where are you on this journey of co-elevation with your team on these critical dimensions. You can get all of that at coelevation.com, coelevation.com. But I wanted to leave you today not just with the principles and the awakening of their importance, but I wanted to go deep into the practices. So I'm going to take these ideas of co-elevation and these behaviors, and I'm going to bring those into very distinct coaching practices I want to give you right now. I call them high return practices. High return practices. It's how, in a remote world, you can have a better team than you actually had in a physical co-located world. Because that is the important thing that I've learned in our research around remote business, which is remote and virtual business can actually be detrimental to your business, or it could be accretive. And the difference is whether or not you are engineering the way you're working. Are you engineering the way you're working so that your team is better in a remote world or as good as? I want you to not engineer work so that it looks like it used to be in a physical work world. We're in the next half of an hour, we're going to re-engineer the way you're working. We're going to re-engineer the way you're working in a remote world that's better. And I call this a remote reboot. If I want you to do the big reboot of your organization to be 10x transformational, go 5 years forward, then what I want you to do is I want you to think about doing that in a remote world called a remote reboot. Now, the key to recognize this, I'm going to spend a moment on remote for you, is that being physically distant from your team is not relevant. Being physically distant from your team is not relevant. The distance that matters is strategic distance, operational distance, and affinity distance. Let me explain that. Strategic distance is when you were in a physical world together, you would get alignment. You would close strategic distance. You would get alignment by the meeting after the meeting. You'd get alignment from that walking down the hallways, the lunch conversations, etc. You don't have those available to you in a remote world, but it doesn't mean that you can't close that kind of distance. It means you've got to do it more purposefully, more intentionally. But as a result, your meetings have to change. It used to be that your meeting served a certain purpose, but then that what happened after the meeting organically was more important. That can't be true anymore. We've got to make sure that the conversations happen in the room. The real deep teaming out, I'll explain what that means. Teaming out, bold conversations have to happen in the room, and they can. The next piece is operational distance. We have been living in an agile work environment for the last months. At the peak of the pandemic, we were all waking up every week saying, holy cow, what's this next week look like? Okay, got it. Now we get through the week, we take a breath. What did we get done? Where were we struggling? What do we need to change? What are we doing going forward? That's called agile. And I want to start seeing agile adoption processes at the executive team level. You need to lead with agile. I was talking yesterday to the CEO of one of the largest consumer packaged goods companies, and they had really been boldly proud of how using agile for new product development. They went from a 2-year product development cycle to 6 months. And the problem was they were not doing it at the level of the executive team. And as a result, they weren't iteratively prioritizing and reprioritizing what needed to happen at that executive team level. We're going to talk about that. And then finally, affinity distance, which is the ability for you to make sure that the care, the intimacy, the connectedness, the I give a damn, and the I'm not going to let you fail, that affinity distance is closed. And you're going to have to do that purposefully too. You have to make a purposeful commitment to close that affinity distance. So we're going to talk about all three of those things. And I believe that in a remote world, you could close the distance, the operational distance, the strategic distance, and the affinity distance. And you can create a bold organization that's ready to go 10x from where you are today. Now, by the way, I have done this. I've been so excited since March, and I haven't done it flawlessly. In fact, it's been fantastic. I've made some big mistakes, and I've been able to pivot quickly. I have been able to birth an entire middle market business that I didn't have. I predominantly only served Fortune 500s, but during this period of time, I created an entire middle market business that I hadn't had before. I created an info products business that I didn't have before. Now, by the way, that one didn't go as well as it needed to, and I was able to pivot that. So there's some challenges and struggles associated with that business. Pivot it, have a new team in place now today. And I've launched this massive research project with 12 researchers and writers just focusing on the future of work as we see it evolving of the last year. All of this happening since March. And God, I don't have to travel as much as I used to because it's allowed me, frankly, to be a better CEO and being able to be attentive to this organization in ways that I wasn't able to be before. But let's go ahead and start. I want to walk you through 4 major areas in the next less than 20 minutes, and 4 major areas for you to really rethink co-elevating and going to the next level and being truly transformational. The first big thing I want you to think about is who's your team? Who's your team? There's a reason why in Leading Without Authority, it's the very first chapter title. It's called Who's Your Team? What I mean by that is this. Your team is no longer who reports to you. It's no longer who reports to you. It's irrelevant. Your team are all the extraordinary people you need to marshal to be transformational, to level up, to go to the next level. First of all, from a practical perspective, I've got some extraordinary friends of mine who have been members of my team since March that now can pop in at 10-minute increments to meetings that I have. You know, early on, a friend of mine named Peter Diamandis said to me, Keith, you really ought to be looking at the middle market as a source of growth for your business. And you should be investing more heavily in that area. And with that invitation, right, also came his willingness to be my coach. And it's been extraordinary. He and I have been speaking on a weekly basis. I have helped him in some of the new businesses he's created. I've always been Peter Diamandis' team coach, but now I'm a business associate and a friend of his and a team member of his on so many of the things he's working on. It's just an example. And one of the things I did on Monday was I highly encouraged those of you who are here at the conference, find your partners, find your co-elevating partners here. You can find a set of CEOs that have your back, that you have each other back. I mean, it was Charles Schwab that through the YPO organization found the breakthrough in the use of technology to recreate his business. That's what created the Schwab that we know today because of his tech friends that were in his YPO forum chapter. The Inc. community is there for you. You need to just start networking and going deeper and finding that tight group of people that won't let you fail here. But you need to do that by expertise. All of the areas that you're beginning to think of, innovate within, you need to be able to reach out and build those networks and bring them into more constant conversations with you. Now, for you to be able to open them up, as I mentioned before, you need to open porosity. How do you serve them? How do you show that strength of authenticity, of vulnerability, of care, of connectedness to them that invites them in? I am so humbled by the team of individuals that are working with me to recreate my mission, which is now their mission. And that's one of the most important parts of all of this, which is you're really movement leaders. You're movement leaders because as each of you has a vision, a fuzzy vision of where you want to go, whether it's somebody you're inviting in to be your employee or somebody you're inviting in to be a consultant or somebody you're inviting in to be of service to you and you to be of service to them, you need to open them up because the first person that you invite in, you're inviting them into their team, not just yours. You're inviting them into their team, not just yours. I want you to recognize that these individuals are going to be co-creators with you, true co-creators. So I'm going to leave that. Who's your team? Leveling up, rethinking who your team is. I would end, if this was a workshop, with saying to you, write down a bold, fuzzy vision or mission that you have, right? And then right underneath it, write some of the individuals you'd like to invite in to co-create the delivery of that. Now, second of all, I do want you to co-create. Number two is I want you to break through with innovation through co-creation. This isn't about you being the brilliant mind anymore. This is you co-creating with other brilliant minds. 1 + 1 = 5. That's really what has to happen. I reached out to an old dear friend of mine to co-lead this research project of mine. And gosh, I have to say that I am just inspired by the insights and wisdom that he's bringing to the table in our research that I've never had in some of the research that I've done before, particularly in this area of technological advancement to the future of work. My point is that you've got to lead with co-creation. Too many of us are the innovators, and then we're distributing things to do. Now, how do you do that? You lead with big questions. You lead with big questions. There's a practice that I call collaborative problem solving, CPS. Once you figure out who your team is, whether it's the people who report to you, plus the vendors, plus the advisors, plus the friends, you get these individuals together and you ask them the big, bold questions. And you ask them these big, bold questions repeatedly. Maybe at the very top is something as big as what are the areas of unexpected growth in our business that we might not be seeing today? Markets, adjacencies, ideas, market changes that are coming down the pike, whatever it happens to be. Think about these big, bold ideas, And now pause. Don't have a big conversation with 8 people or more in a Zoom room or a Microsoft Teams room. You break everybody down into small groups. Breakouts are the superfood of innovation because what happens is that in small groups you have inclusion, you have risk-taking, you have psychological safety, you have people willing to say stupid stuff that wouldn't necessarily be stupid stuff, but might be the tipping point of extraordinary things. Break them into small groups and then have them answer the questions and then come back. In the small groups, have them open a Google Doc and have them answer their ideas in a small Google Doc. So all that's captured, have them come back. This you will find incredible breakout, incredible bold breakthroughs in your ideas. My partners at Ferrazzi Greenlight are going to be running a workshop on this, I think today, on innovation through inclusivity. We need diverse and inclusive inputs to really be bold. And I want you to learn how to iteratively ask these questions and create the kind of psychological safety that, boom, gives you answers you've never had before, okay? Now, the next big area is agility. I talked about agility. Being agile means your team is committed to negotiating very clear outcomes, sprinting to those outcomes in a short period of time, right? Every individual has, what are the big hills we have to take? What are the big hills we have to take? So in the first set of collaborative problem-solving discussions, you identify what those big hills are you need to take to be bold, to be inclusive, to break through to this new idea, this new vision for your future, right? Then what you do is you negotiate sprints, because those sprints, by the end of the sprint, the world could change, as we found out in the peak of the pandemic. In 1 week, in 1 day, Delta Airlines was doing daily sprints as they renegotiated how to take their great company into something that was going to emerge as a smaller business, but still great and greater. I've been so impressed. I was coaching that organization going into the pandemic. And then as I've watched them through the pandemic, it's amazing how that organization has leveraged these simple principles to be able to emerge one of the strongest. They were the strongest, but now they're even stronger and more well-defined why they're going to be strong coming out of this pandemic. Incredible organization, incredible co-elevating leadership team. But as this basis of agility gets negotiated in these sprints, right? Here's a real superpower at the end of each sprint. So each of your associates will report a sprint, will report the end of a sprint. They're going to report very simply, what have they done in the last week or two? Where are they struggling? Where are they struggling? Where do they need help? And that's so important that you open up vulnerability and humility among the team. And what are they planning to do in the next couple of weeks? Okay. Now, with that report, in the past, report outs were given. I got to tell you something. Report outs are the biggest waste of time. And as entrepreneurs, we've got to stop report outs as a medium of how our meetings are organized. Report out, report out, report out. You talking to a couple of people, report out, report out. Forget it. At the end of the report out, the whole team owns the bulletproofing and the stress testing of that particular report out. Take everybody to breakout rooms of 2 or 3. Have them write in a Google Doc. Of having listened to that report, that sprint report, what risks aren't they seeing? What challenges do we have to offer that person? What bold innovations do we want to give that person they might not have thought of? And what offers of help and support? What offers of help or support? Google Doc. All of that comes back to the sprint owner. It is amazing. Now all of a sudden you've turned your team into the, as I said, it's a superfood. Turn your team into the kind of team it should be. Challenging, innovative, bold, and generous, supportive of each other. This is one of the most powerful things you could do, is this bulletproofing process and killing the old form of report outs. My partners, again, are going to be working with you on a workshop if you want. I think it's on Thursday, being agile and the power of peer partnering. Being agile and the power of peer partnering. You can get much more detail how do you re-engineer for agility. Now, I don't know if you, I'm so passionate, I'm so excited. This is the kind of energy I've been approaching life since March, right? I've been approaching all of these businesses, and it can be draining on me and on the businesses around me and on the people around me. We've got to be committed to resilience. Resilience is a word that is bantered around a lot. But the reality is there is a ton of stressors that I would suggest you even can use the processes we've just talked about. Step number 1, ask your entire organization to go into small breakout rooms. You can do a meeting of everybody. Go into small breakout rooms and write the things that are most stressing them, the specific categories of things that are most stressing them. Meeting fatigue, parenting young children, the political landscape, the systemic racism and its impact in society today. Whatever it is, have them write these things down. And then pick a few of these which seem to be dominant in your organization and do again another collaborative problem-solving discussion where everybody breaks into rooms and they add the things that they think we should be doing to reduce the stressors. Co-create the resolution for resilience. Now, other things that I know generically are really powerful for resilience is you personally modeling resilience. When I hit a sprint failure for myself and my info products business early on in the year, I expressed my vulnerability, my disappointment in myself, my lack of foresight because of some of the mistakes I made and we made. And I mourned it in public. And I said to them, gosh, I'm so disappointed in myself, etc. But that said, boom, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. You've got to show that radical adaptability. And you got to say, listen, this is what resilience is, right? It's the humility of making mistakes. It's making them quickly. It's adapting and it's repositioning and it's getting back on the horse and pivoting and going forward, right? And also celebrating failure and shutting things down. That's also powerful role modeling as a leader. Now, a few other things that are really important. I talked to you about affinity distance early on. For resilience, you've got to make sure that team is bolstering each other's energy. Part of the recontracting, when you go to co-elevation coelevation.com, coelevation.com. You're going to get that recontracting. Part of it is to say to your team, we own each other's energy. It's not just you as a leader playing whack-a-mole and helping everybody you can. It's the team owning the team's energy. And that's a social contract that needs to be renegotiated. And you've got to spend time and space for it because it's not happening in the break rooms. It's even better when it happens as a team, not in little pots where schisms and factions and fractions can be created. You want this to be a team effort, a true tribe, a co-elevating team that is equally committed to each other. And one of the things I do is a very quick exercise called sweet and sour at the beginning of a meeting. You can bound meetings with some of these intimacy exercises that really build up connectivity and empathy. Sweet and sour at the beginning. What's going on in your life? Sweet and sour. Sweet, I couldn't be more thrilled than the launch of this new book, right? The Leading Without Authority. Couldn't also be more thrilled with some of the team members that have come into my organization. That's sweet. It's been humbling. Sour, well, I've got an older son who is struggling during these times. And what I'm struggling about, to be honest with you, is he's making bad decisions. And I'm finding some of the bad decisions he's making are challenging me because I want to be supportive of him, but I want to hold him accountable for some of these decisions while still being empathetic and not treating him like my dad treated me. And I feel sometimes right now I'm not walking the line well, and I'm not being as good a father as I should be. But that is what I'm working on. That's my sour. Now, you could do that quickly and go around the room with your team and really share what's going on. You could take an entire meeting and do something I call a personal professional check-in. What's going on in your life personally and professionally? Where are you struggling? But don't forget celebration. In the middle of a meeting, I want you to have everybody pause for a moment and say, what or who does each of us want to celebrate about what's going on in the workplace today? Boom, 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 boom. Have everybody celebrate somebody else. Or we're even in fatigue. We're fractured, we're fatigued, and we're frustrated, but we need to purposely bring those celebratory moments in the middle. And gratitude. I end every meeting with a gratitude circle. Everybody goes around and they explain what they're most grateful for from the meeting we just had. Really simple, really short, but it's so powerful to make sure that we exit meetings with the kind of powerful feeling of gratitude and accomplishment and achievement. The other thing I do, by the way, from a resilience perspective is, we're starting to look at no meeting Wednesdays. We're starting to look at ending every half an hour meeting 5 minutes early and every 1 hour meeting 10 minutes early. Give people time to break. We can't have this constant sprint that we've been doing out of the adrenaline, like I'm feeling right now with you. We've got to be able to make the pause. Put out of the office to take care of your children on your own calendar so everybody can see it. Put I'm taking a walk. Put I'm doing yoga. Listen, if we're negotiating outcomes, then we don't need to worry about whether people are working at every moment of the day. Let them have their time. Let them have their breaks. Negotiate the outcomes, hold accountable to outcomes, and bulletproof each other's sprints. Make sure that we're squeezing value out of what we're doing, but give people the time. Give people the time to pause. And my partners are also running a workshop on this. I think it's on Friday, about energy and resilience of a team. I think that's the workshop on Friday. Look, I am so grateful, ending in a gratitude. I am so grateful to be here, to be back with you again. I remember years and years ago when my first book was published, showing up. And the fact that Scott invited me to be with you again today is it's a blessing, it's an honor, it's impactful to me. You're a community that I care deeply about. And if we can, as a community, serve each other, if we can, as a community, truly co-elevate, if we can dig in deeper and open ourselves up humbly and vulnerably to each other, but generously, where we make that commitment. I'm making that commitment to you. All of the work that we're doing, the research of Go Forward to Work, Scott and I are negotiating how I can serve your community and consistently bringing that research to this community. And I couldn't, for so much that you've given me. You made my first book a bestseller. You allowed me the permission to serve the world of the future of business, to research where we need to be and where we're going. And I wake up every day blessed and proud because of this community, and I have so much to be thankful for. and generous for. And that's my movement, by the way. My movement, my massive transformative purpose, as my friend Peter Diamandis says, is that I want to have 100 million leaders in the world leading with co-elevation. Imagine what that would be like. Imagine the distinction between that versus the fractured and the divisive world of leadership that we often see around the world today. But as a core, as entrepreneurs, if we can be the tipping point, if we can set a standard for co-elevation inside of our own organizations, inside of our own executive teams, that will spill out. I became a co-elevating parent as a result of this work. I couldn't lead my sons the way that my father led me. I had to earn permission to lead with my boys. I have 2 foster children, and they came into my life at 12 years of age and 16 years of age. And they looked at me and they said, "You will not be my father." I've had to learn the hard way to be a better spouse in a co-elevating fashion and set a new standard for what does it mean to be a family and to be committed to each other's elevation. But that means stepping off of a pedestal and a podium and being not just a peer, but a servant of the community that I would like to lead, to move. And that's what it means to be a movement leader. I want all of you to find your vision, find your massive transformative purpose, utilize these co-elevating tools. And again, coelevation.com is there for you as a tool set. But I want you to be the kind of movement leader and the greatness that all of you aspire to, and that at this point in time, at this inflection point, is available to you. It's available to you. And I hope you take advantage of it. And I look forward to serving you and continue to be here with you. Thank you.